Great. Good afternoon all, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on the Department's Children Missing Education Statutory Guidance. This webinar follows the publication of the Department's updates to the guidance that were published on the 8th of September. This includes, for the first time, the publication of guidance as statutory for schools as well as local authorities, and that's why we've invited you all to join us here today. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to reiterate that this webinar is for schools only. For any local authorities on the call, please do instead reach out to us directly. We ran a webinar on what the changes mean for local authorities at the beginning of last month. That session was recorded and we can share the recording with you, which may be of more relevance. Now, for those of you that don't know us, I'm Maddie Olahead. I work in the attendance division at the Department of Education, and I'm joined today by my colleague Faye, who will be presenting alongside me. Before we get into the content of the session, I just wanted to kick off with a little bit of housekeeping. So just to make you aware, as I said, this session will be recorded. That's both for you to be able to watch back and to reference, but also for those who are unable to attend today. We will share a link to the recording, the slide pack and a summary of the Q&A with all attendees following the event today. Now, sorry, we have lots to get through with you today, and we're really keen to make sure that we have lots of time at the end left for the Q&A session. So while we won't be responding to questions throughout the duration of the session, we do ask that if you have any questions at all, please use the Q&A function at the side of this broadcast to submit any questions. We will wait until the end before we respond to any of those. But if you see that somebody else has asked a question that you would also like to know the answer to, then please give that an upvote and we'll make sure that we prioritise answering those with the most votes today. Saying that, while if we get lots of questions, we may run out of time, please do not worry if we don't manage to get to your question in this session. As I said, we will be developing a question and answer document that will be circulated to you, and we will make sure to include all questions in that document. Just to make you aware as well that we do have colleagues joining us today who will be moderating the questions that are submitted to the Q&A function. We just want to say we're very sorry in advance if your question does get dismissed and isn't one of the ones that we take forward. We, as I say, are very limited on time today, so we please ask that you keep all questions relevant to the Children Missing Education guidance only, as they're the only ones that we will be able to answer today. And where possible, you try and keep your questions broad rather than individual cases, as unfortunately we can't advise on anything that is an individual case that we don't know all of the circumstances about. But as I say, on the whole, very happy to answer any questions around the guidance. And if you do have anything that speaks more widely to other policy areas, then please do reach out through other departmental contact forms. So I think that covers everything in terms of housekeeping and all of those things. So I'm going to hand over to Faye now, who's going to kick off with talking us through what we'll be covering today.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hi. I'm just gonna, if we could just go on to the next slide, please, and then I'll start from there. Thank you. So yeah, as Maddie said, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about the updated guidance on children missing education. So in this session, we'll explore what these changes mean for you and the vital role you play in identifying and supporting children missing education. So as Maddie said, I'm Faye Thompson. I'll be taking you through the first part of this webinar, and we're going to cover what's new for schools, what has changed for local authorities and what schools should expect from them. We'll briefly talk through a case study example of effective partnership working between local authorities and schools. We'll also briefly review further CME resources, and as already mentioned, there'll be a live Q&A at the end. So as a bit of an overview, the statutory guidance was published really recently, just on the 8th of September. We wanted to improve consistency and support for CME following a call for evidence, which was published in 2024, and further engagement with local authorities across England to understand the sector's current approach to identifying and supporting CME. So as a result of our findings, we've ran a series of best practice webinars for all local authorities in England. We've made the aggregate data collection on children missing education mandatory from autumn 2024 onwards. And we've also updated the CME guidance, which is why you're all here today. Next slide, please. So because we know that there can sometimes be confusion around the definition of CME, particularly confusion about missing children or children who miss a lot of school for various reasons, we wanted to start by making the definition of CME really clear for those who might not have had the chance to read the guidance yet. We also wanted to clarify that CME is not the same as a child who's missing school some or a lot of the time, or those who are receiving a suitable home education or education via an alternative provision setting, for example. So children missing education or CME, we'll probably refer to them both throughout this webinar, are children of compulsory school age who are not registered pupils at a school and are not receiving suitable education otherwise than at a school. So this includes all the points listed on this slide, but essentially, if a child is not registered at school and is not receiving suitable education anywhere else, so at home or through alternative provision, they are CME. And this takes us on to the children who can sometimes be defined as CME, but who are not CME. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this is another kind of really important kind of starting point for the webinar that we just wanted to get across. That CME are not children who are receiving suitable education otherwise than at school, or in other words, any other valid place such as suitable elective home education or in an alternative provision setting. So this point builds on the previous one, the next point, and it highlights an important clarification that if a child is being electively home educated and the local authority has no reason to believe that that education is unsuitable, the local authority would not be making informal inquiries. So the absence of such inquiries does not mean the electively home educated child is CME. So that was also something really important that we wanted to get across in the new guidance and through this webinar. Finally, we've listed here that if a child is registered at your school or any school, even if they are persistently absent or severely absent, they are not CME because they are registered at that school. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide, I think, is why we're all here today, because we all want to do our best to support children missing education. Nobody here today would want any child to miss out on the education they have the right to receive. We don't want any child to fall through the cracks or be at risk of harm of any kind. And children missing education and safeguarding children is a shared responsibility and should always be seen as this. We also know that CME does include some of our most vulnerable children, and we all need to work together to ensure they are safe and have access to education and opportunities. Once identified, it's vital that these children are supported back into education quickly and successfully, and we all have that role to play in supporting that process. We know that a good education gives children strong foundations, it sets them up for work and life, and that when things are working well and children have the right support, that ambition, opportunities, and belonging comes from receiving a suitable education. We really want to stress that everyone who has contact with a child has a role to play in identifying concerns, sharing information, and taking prompt action to help in the identification and support of CME. So I'm now going to hand back to Maddie to take you through the next part of the webinar.
Brilliant, thank you, Faye. So if we skip on to the next slide, please. Perfect. So we thought it'd be helpful to first set out the process for revising and publishing the updated guidance. So we revised the previous version of the guidance, which was published in 2016, based on the responses to the department's call for evidence, which was run in the summer of 2023, as well as a series of fieldwork conversations that we conducted at the end of last year with 10% of local authorities. Following that, we then tested the revisions with colleagues across policy areas internally in the department itself, as well as policy colleagues in other departments to see how we could improve their support for supporting you with fulfilling your CME duties as well. We then conducted a series of roundtables with 20% of local authority CME teams, as well as a wide variety of school representatives and parent stakeholder groups. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all of those on the call who provided comments and took the time to provide feedback that led to the updates to this guidance as well. The revised guidance then received ministerial approval, which enabled us to publish the revised version at the beginning of this academic year. If we skip on to the next slide. So I'm just going to kick us off by giving a bit of an overview of what the updates were. So revisions focused on three main areas, some of which Faye has already touched on briefly. So the first of which is that the updates intended to make clear the definition of children missing education, ensuring that all local authority areas and schools are applying that same definition. This includes which children it consists of, as well as those cohorts of children who might be most at risk of becoming children missing education. Secondly, improvements look to clarify the roles and responsibilities of schools and local authorities in identifying and supporting children missing education, as well as the crucial role of other agencies in supporting you to meet your duties alongside local authorities. The guidance also works to enhance signposting to resources and best practice to better support you in working with local authorities to conduct your inquiries as well. We hope that revisions to the guidance help you as schools to understand your responsibilities to work together with local authorities and, where necessary, other related agencies and organisations that help to promote the safeguarding and the welfare of children. So to do this, not only have we revised the text to provide additional clarity, we've also added 14 new sections to the guidance. So for those of you that have seen the guidance, you should be able to see that these sections include a section on who are children missing education, changes to the general principles, a clear section setting out the legal duties for both schools and local authorities towards these children. We've added 2 new sections on information sharing, both setting out how you can work with local agencies to gather information regarding the circumstances of children who you deem to be at risk, but also avenues for national information sharing as well. We've included a section that enhances the safeguarding duties relating to children missing education, entitled Children at Risk of Harm. And then we've also included sections on children in temporary accommodation, the processes for school attendance orders, the expectations for both local authorities and schools in the admissions process for children who are formerly children missing education, how data can be better used both for accountability but also for identifying children who may be at increased risk of becoming children missing education. We've added a section on accountability across local authorities and schools for children missing education duties. And then we've also added some sections which clearly link to the guidance set out in the Working Together to Improve School Attendance guidance. This includes expectations around removing names from the admissions register, as well as adding names to the admissions register, and then sections on a variety of different tools and resources that you might need in fulfilling your duties. You'll be familiar with systems such as Get Information About the Pupil, the School-to-School and School-to-School system as well. So that's just a very brief overview of the changes on the whole. If we skip onto the next slide, I just want to take a bit of time to get into what is actually new for schools in the updated guidance. So the biggest change to the guidance is that the Children Missing Education guidance was published on the 8th of September as statutory for schools for the very first time. When we say this, it's definitely worth noting that the guidance has always been statutory for local authorities, and it continues to be statutory for them too, alongside you. And while it has now been published as statutory for the first time for schools, it doesn't include any new responsibilities. The guidance simply aligns with the pre-existing safeguarding duties expected of schools and the expectations of schools that are already set out in the department's Working Together to Improve School Attendance statutory guidance. In terms of how we have published this as statutory, so we've published the guidance under existing legislation. You can see the legislation that this sits under set out on the slide in front of you. So this includes the Admissions Register, School Attendance Pupil Registration Regulations 2024, which sets out the expectations of what schools must do, both when adding pupils to their school admissions register, but also when pupils are removed. We've really enhanced the link to children missing education duties as a safeguarding duty and expectation for schools, and this sits under the Safeguarding Section 1754 of the Education Act 2002. And we've also drawn on the information sharing, education, information about individual pupils regulations 2024. And basically that imposes requirements on maintained schools, non-maintained special schools, academy schools, and alternative provision academies to provide information about pupils at the school to the Secretary of State when requested. So in this case, that would be when it is to identify and support children missing education. So in terms of the intention of publishing a statutory for schools alongside local authorities, this is to consolidate the important roles and responsibilities of both local authorities and schools into one clear document that can be used by everybody who is involved in supporting and identifying these children. While the guidance sets out clear expectations for schools and local authorities to identify and support children missing education, we recognise that individual circumstances of these children can be wide and can be very complex, and that demographics and services vary geographically across the country and across local authority areas. For this reason, updates to the guidance allow for those local nuances and provide flexibility to local authorities and schools to make your own decision making about how to meet the expectations set out into the guidance. You'll already probably be aware that some of you will have local authorities that have slightly different children missing education policies in your area, and that's to allow for the different makeups of children and the school systems in your area as well. So if we jump onto the next slide, please, then I'm just going to get into what we mean when we say that we have updated the guidance to set out the clearer responsibilities of local authorities and schools. So, as mentioned, updates to the guidance further clarify the roles and responsibility of schools, local authorities, and parents as well. The guidance is split into sections that go into detail on the responsibilities of each of these groups. So you'll be able to see in the guide, when you navigate the HTML version of the guidance, you can click specifically on school responsibilities, and that will take you to what the expectations are for you in supporting these children. Alongside the guidance document, we have also published a summary table of responsibilities. This should not be used instead of the guidance, but hopefully provides a very clear summary of what is expected of you, but also what you can expect from local authorities too, in ensuring that children missing education receive the support that they need. You'll see in the guidance that there is emphasis on the school's role as a safeguarding, CME as a safeguarding concern. This is partly reflected in some of the additional sections that have been added, such as the section on off-rolling and the associated risks of doing so. The guidance also makes stronger links to the working together to improve school attendance guidance. This is based on feedback received both from schools and local authorities about potential misalignment across the two documents. You can see clearly some of the sections that sort of reiterate word for word what is set out in that guidance. That includes sections around maintaining the admissions register, regulations for removing children from school register, as well as throughout the support first approach to both preventing children from becoming children missing education, but also to ensuring that the right support is in place to integrate former children missing education back into a suitable education. As well as emphasising the important role schools play in conducting reasonable inquiries to ensure the prompt identification of children missing education so that support can be provided at the earliest convenience and the duration that these children spend out of education is reduced as far as possible. If we skip on to the next slide, please. Then I'm just going to break down in more detail what we mean when we say that we've enhanced the expectations around a school's role in making reasonable inquiries. So in terms of making new reasonable inquiries, Often, we are very aware that schools have a pre-existing knowledge of the child and their families, or will have intelligence from somebody else in the school who knows a neighbour. This could be a neighbour, a staff member, somebody who knows the family, the child, better than anybody else does. For that reason, we believe that schools are better placed to support local authorities with their initial and ongoing inquiries to identify children missing education. We want to be really clear that this does not mean that schools are expected to carry out inquiries that are actually the duty of local authorities, or that they should go above and beyond their existing responsibilities related to safeguarding and information sharing. It's important to keep the child at the centre, though, and their need to be safe and to receive a suitable education is an important one. And where schools can, as far as is reasonably possible, work with local authorities and provide information, and hopefully that child can be located and supported as quickly as possible. So the guidance provides clarification on schools' responsibilities to, firstly, do their own initial proactive work to locate a child who is not yet a child missing education, but there are indications that they may be at risk of becoming a child missing education. That they should immediately make inquiries to establish the child's whereabouts, where a school becomes aware that a child on their register's absence is reoccurring and unexplained. And they should ensure that they have in place arrangements whereby all unexpected and unexplained absences are promptly inquired about and that the family and the child are engaged with. Once a child is suspected of actually being a child missing education and you have reason to believe that the child will not be returning, the guidance sets out the expectation that you work jointly with local authorities to conduct further reasonable inquiries, to provide information and support as far as possible. The guidance also sets out when schools should make a referral to children's social care and potentially the police if appropriate, if they have reason to believe that the child might be at immediate risk of danger or harm. And again, it links to the expectations as set out in the existing statutory guidance on working together to improve school attendance, to ensure that a support first approach is used as a preventative measure for children becoming children missing education or repeatedly moving in and out of the school system. If we skip on to the next slide, please. Then the final changes in the guidance for schools that I just wanted to take a moment to talk about today is the additional and enhanced section on admissions expectations. So the guidance makes clear that collaboration is essential to reduce time out of education and ensure all children of compulsory school age receive suitable school placements. So the guidance urges schools as much as possible to support local authorities with providing school places for children who do not currently have them. It sets out that schools must provide timely, appropriate support for integration, including ensuring that they have efficient admissions processes to prevent any delays, and that they follow the working together guidance to ensure support is put in place to reduce barriers to a continued attendance where they may exist. Once a school place is offered, schools should coordinate with the local authority to ensure the child starts as promptly as possible. This is to reduce the amount of education that child has missed as much as they're able to. It also sets out that schools have a duty to notify the local authority when a pupil is both added or removed from the admissions register outside of standard transition times. Some local authorities, and you may know this if this is one of the local authorities that you reside in, they may choose to extend that duty to include standard transition times too. We're very aware that when we say this, most schools are already doing lots of these things and are doing them really well, but the guidance just re-emphasises how this relates to children missing education duties in particular. So that's what is new for schools in particular. I'm now going to hand over to Faye, who's going to cover what you can expect from local authorities in the new guidance too.
Thank you. That's brilliant. So there is a lot of text on this slide and just very conscious of time, so we get to spend more time on the Q&A. So I won't spend too long on this, but I did want to start with the update made to the joint reasonable inquiry section of the guidance. So we broke this down this time. into making reasonable inquiries and conducting inquiries. And while these sections are in the local authority responsibility part of the guidance, there are some expectations of schools outlined here too, which were added in to further emphasise the importance of working together, particularly in the earlier stage of inquiries. I think also relevant to schools is the actions list, which has been enhanced. So I wanted to say as well at this point that we do appreciate that there may be further actions to take which aren't listed in the guidance. And of course, obviously as well, not all actions will be necessary or appropriate in every case or for schools to undertake. There are also two distinct sections for local authorities on information sharing, and a section on working with other local authorities, which might also be useful for schools to refer to. We know that schools can often be located in different local authorities to the one the child resides in, and so may end up communicating with multiple local authorities when making those initial inquiries, especially. And on to safeguarding, which we've mentioned lots of times already. This isn't a section in itself, but it was important to make clear throughout the guidance and within the children at risk of harm section that CME should be seen as a safeguarding issue. And this is critical to remember when sharing information or considering whether to share information. I think another relevant update for schools is the school attendance order section. We know this can sometimes be a complicated process for local authorities and schools to navigate, so we wanted to set that out as clearly as possible. So if we could skip on to the next slide, please. So for this particular webinar, we really wanted to outline what schools should expect from local authorities, starting with clear policies and procedures. So we don't want any school to not be able to find who they should make a CME referral to, or in the case of local authorities who have a referral form, where that form can be found. So your local authorities process around this should be really clear, along with the response times. So as with the working together to improve school attendance guidance, we also really wanted to emphasise the importance of collaborative working between all of those involved with the child missing education. So linking back to the action section of the guidance I covered in the previous slide, this includes setting clear allocation, completion and coordination of responsibilities between LAs and schools. And to ensure that a truly child-centred approach is maintained, effective communication and partnership working are essential. The last point on this slide relates to when a child missing education has been identified and located, and the next step is to support them into receiving a suitable education. So we know that schools have a role to play in working with a local authority to secure a place for a child missing education where suitable, and where a place is found, local authorities should support schools with reintegrating that child into their school. If we could just skip on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a reminder as well, lots of text on this slide, but we will be showing the slides. I won't go over every detail on this slide. We wanted to include this here as an example, and it is just an example of effective partnership working. You can see the first step in this case. So this the example is about a child called Mia, who was attending school and then stopped coming to school. And this slide outlines the school procedures and the local authority procedures, and is a best case example. But we wanted to indicate here, so we understand that some LAs will have different timeframes around when to bring them in. This example, the school and local authority are communicating with each other the moment the school had concerns over the child. And that was before making the CME referral in step 2. So from step 3, you can see that the local authority CME team then formally take forward the case, but we'd expect in almost all cases that the school would be continuing to do their own inquiries alongside. And that could include, talking to the child's friends, neighbours, letting the local authority know if anyone in the school had mentioned her whereabouts, just as a few examples. And then the 5th stage in this example is where a new school place is offered in an alternative LA once the child is located. But that LA is still working with the local authority and the schools involved as well. So if we just skip on to slide 15. Thank you. So I'll just whiz us through the further resources, which I hope you found helpful so far if you've been into the guidance page. So this includes an expanded section on the cohorts of children who might be at greater risk of becoming CME. We've added some new cohorts to this guidance, and that's based on the valued feedback and suggestions we received from local authorities and schools. Again, we know that not all at-risk cohorts will be covered here, but we're hoping that we've covered the main groups, the groups that feedback's kind of suggested needed to be put into this guidance. There's also now a section that provides information on the get information about a pupil, school-to-school systems. And finally, something which we hope is really useful for local authorities and schools is a summary of responsibilities document.
That's going on in the Q&A section. As Faye just said, we will be uploading the webinar recording today. It will be on the DFE YouTube channel. We'll circulate a link to that recording to all of you and anybody else who signed up but was unable to make it today. We will also include the Q&A document and the slides from the webinar as well. Please do pass on any of these resources to anybody else that you work with who interacts with children missing education and who may find them helpful at all. And please do also feel free to reach out to us directly if you have any further questions at all. But otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to join this webinar today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.